Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you are listening to episode number 19. Today we're talking Tinemen, tuned-in archery, weekday walkers, and how to stack the odds in your favor in the deer woods with Dan Bayus. So stay tuned. All right, welcome everybody to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. You are listening to episode number 19, and today we are joined by Dan Bayus of Tinemen fame and tuned-in archery. I probably first heard of Dan from his work with tuned-in archery as a guy who can really tune a bow. I know that he's known nationally. People were shipping bows to him from all over the country to have him tune their bows. I think his craftsmanship kind of speaks for itself in terms of folks flying their bows in from all over the country to have him specifically work on them. He also does some work with the folks from Tinemen, which is a TV show. Of course, I've watched plenty of their videos online. They also have some interesting works coming up that they're going to be working with Carbon TV. So that is an awesome opportunity for Tinemen, and it also, of course, gives us the opportunity to kind of watch more of their episodes in the digital realm, which a lot of folks are kind of moving towards. So it's great to hear that. Also, just a little piece of housekeeping here, that I did create 2 YouTube videos that was based on the Public Land Scout that I did last weekend. The YouTube videos are up, and there's 2 blog posts that are associated with both of those. I did do some Facebook live feed stuff, so you may have seen some of that over the past weekend while I was scouting that public land. But if you haven't had a chance to check it out, you can head over to the truthfromthestand.com site and check out the blog post with the videos, or you can head directly to our YouTube page and kind of tag along for a day of scouting with yours truly. And usually at this time, is when we take a break to hear from a word about our partners. And of course, one of our partners that we've been working with for a little while is Exodus Outdoor Gear, and those guys have been great. And so today we decided to do something just a little bit different, and we thought we would give away a Exodus Lift camera. And all you have to do in order to win the camera is listen to this podcast today, and I will give directions at some point during the course of the podcast on the actions you would need to take in order to be in the running to win the Lift camera. So listen to the duration of this podcast. At some point, I will give you directions. It's not going to be something super complicated. It'll be pretty easy. But at some point, we'll throw those directions in here. And then if you take that action, you'll be in the running to potentially win a new Exodus Lift camera. So we'd like to thank the guys from Exodus for helping us set that up. And that's not it, actually. Right now, if you go to the Exodus website, ExodusOutdoorGear.com, and you head to the shop page and you are planning to purchase a camera, you put that camera in your shopping cart, you head to the checkout, and if you place the promo code TRUTH into the promo code slot at checkout, you will receive an additional 10% off of your Exodus trail camera purchase. So the guys from Exodus hooking us up, of course, hooking you guys up, the listeners, and it's really because you guys have been listening to the podcast. It was just kind of a small way for us to say thank you back to you all for spending some time with us, listen to a couple of knuckleheads talking about deer hunting, and we truly do appreciate it, and this is just a small token of our appreciation that we can kind of give back to you guys. And without further ado, I think we will go ahead and dial Dan in. All right, welcome back, everybody. I am Clint Campbell, and you're listening to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I am joined by Dan Bayus. Dan is a fellow that I hooked up with here recently through some mutual friends of ours, the fellows from Exodus. And it's kind of funny the way I kind of came about to learn, I think, who Dan is. It was I started following some of the YouTube videos that you have out online, and funny enough, we were Facebook friends or friends on social media, and I was also following this woman online who was a hunter, and I saw her kill a monster, and I was like, whoa, I was like, look at this huge deer this woman killed. And I started kind of investigating. I was like, hey, man, that last name sounds really familiar. And then I started doing a little bit of investigative work, and lo and behold, it was your wife. So I just got to ask the question: who has the biggest deer in the house this year?
She does, man. She kicked my butt on that one. She got that buck in Ohio, and I actually I struck out in Ohio this year. It was a tough year for me, man. It honestly was probably what I'd say my worst year. But with her, getting that buck in Ohio, man, it made for an actually really good year. So I'm pretty pumped up about it.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. You struck out this year. She dropped a hammer, and I spent my first year in Ohio this November, and I ended up tagging a nice 10 points. So I love Ohio. I have no problems with it.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what? There's a lot of deer and around every corner, man. You never know what's going to come out, and it can be a giant. And it's been great to me in years past. But I managed to put an 8-point down in Pennsylvania. During rifle season, I had some mishaps in PA as well, but between Ohio and PA, man, I got my butt whooped.
Nice. Yeah, it's sometimes you eat the bear, sometimes the bear eats you. This is just one of those years I was doing the eating, because most years I'm the one getting ate up. But so it's kind of, there's a bunch of different things I want to talk to you about and jump into, and we'll try to go through and get through most of them, hopefully in a relatively timely manner. But first, for those of you, or for those who are listening who maybe aren't as familiar with you as I am, could you just give us a little bit of background about yourself, how you started hunting, and what you do in the whitetail world professionally?
Well, I started hunting when I was a kid. I started probably what I'd say gun hunting for the most part when it comes to deer, and it was kind of a family tradition. We all used to get together and for the first day of gun season, and we'd have a big, we'd call it the feed, where everybody brings a bunch of food and get the whole family together, and we'd do deer drives, and that was just the way that Gramps had us do it, man, and that's how I kind of got my start. And I seen how proud it made him. I had an uncle and cousins I really looked up to that, they're big hunters as well. My whole family is, and to make them proud was kind of, it was a driving force, and I think it just kind of all snowballed, and I was very fortunate to be able to hunt some really good woods when I was younger. My first bow buck was a Ohio 10-point. Then the following year, I followed up with a 14-point. And that 14-point was the very first deer that I actually set the stand myself, and it was all done, on my own. And I took a lot of, I was really, really pumped up with that deer, man. I took a lot of pride in that. And I seen that, my uncle, like I had told you, and my cousin Spike and my Uncle Dave, they came and helped me track the deer, and that feeling of, making them proud was kind of, what I mean? That's really what hooked me.
Yeah.
And it snowballed since then. I've been fortunate, like I said, I've had some good land in Ohio to hunt, my whole life pretty much. And in Pennsylvania, I've got a really good buddy, Steve, who owns a nice tract of land, and we've been managing it for quite some years now. And, I'm fortunate to be able to hunt both states. It's really nice being close to the Ohio-PA line. So, I can half hour, I'm in the other state, so it works out really well.
Yeah, that's not a bad it's not a bad location to have there, man, as far as being able to kind of hop back and forth between both states, get a little bit of the best of both worlds there.
Yeah, you aren't kidding, man. And Pennsylvania, I got to give props to the Game Commission on this, the point restriction deal. I was one of them guys at the beginning. I said, "Oh man, that's going to really hurt the hunting." But truth be told, I don't think anybody can tell you different. But the quality of the deer that are we're hunting now in Pennsylvania have really skyrocketed. And I'm telling you, like we hunt 2F, and it's a lot of state land up there. It's a lot of big land, big open woods. So that point restriction, I think up there has really, really, worked wonders up that way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I can definitely attest to that. Growing up, in Pennsylvania, I was raised in PA and did all my hunting in Pennsylvania up until I was probably in my 20s when I took a took a trip with my dad. And I can, just remember back to the deer that I used to see when I was growing up. I mean, if you saw anything that was a 6-point or better, I mean, you were excited about it. There was no, I don't recall ever seeing an 8-point in the woods, while I was hunting, like the entire time I was growing up. And then and that's not even a line. I lived in a pretty rural area, nothing but agricultural land around us. And it was just, everyone who hunted around you if it's brown, it's down approach, and, I think not just the antler restrictions, but I think, a lot of different, entities, whether it's the QDMA association or whatever, is really doing a good job of just educating people on how to manage their herds, manage the deer, and treating it like a resource, that it's, you can't just slay away and expect it to continue to replenish itself if you slay away at a high rate. But so it's interesting you mentioned, you're hunting both states, and, because you're from Ohio, and here's a guy from Ohio coming to Pennsylvania, which, Pennsylvania has a pretty big hunting heritage, but as you were kind of mentioning, it was like, it's not known for, having great deer hunting per se, as far as the size of deer. Mm-hmm. So would you say, I mean, what's your encounter been so far out where you're at? Cause if I'm not mistaken, you're out more toward the Pittsburgh area, right? Western part of the state.
Well, I am. Yes. I'm in the western part. I'm actually living in Erie, Pennsylvania now. And, that is close to Northeast Ohio. So, what I would say is that, the whitetails out this way are, I would say, bigger bodied, and, they're almost like Ohio deer because it is so close to the state line. But, what I've noticed is when I hunt 2F, which is, what is that? Probably 2.5 hours, east of here, the size of them, I guess, rack size and body size, and, it's less agriculture. And I think, that's probably a direct reflection, of caliber, quality of the deer, but I, this past year, I had some pretty dang good bucks on trail cameras, on them Exodus cameras, man. I had one that was actually a double main beam. He would have just been a stud if I would have, been able to get on him. But he had broke his main beam that had the double main beam. That's that side. He broke that off. And it was right when another 5-year-old had moved into the property. And this deer, in front of them cameras, man, I had him fighting deer after deer in the food plot. And, it just was weird. I'm pretty sure that would have been the buck that had, busted him up.
Right.
He's still alive. So I'm hoping, either myself or, one of the guys we hunt with up there, hopefully one of us can get on him.
Nice. Yeah. I know that.
And I don't know. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say I had seen, I think a couple of the pictures maybe that you posted on social, and there's definitely some moments of jealousy. I'm not going to lie.
Well, yeah, you know what? Having them, here's the deal, man. Having them on camera, everybody gets not upset, but all excited and almost like a hopeful, like thinking, oh man, I'm going to kill that deer. There's nothing going to stop me from killing him. And I'm no different, I get it stuck in my head, and there's nothing going to stop me. But at the end of the day, man upstairs is the one who has the final say. And if he doesn't, bless you and bring the animal underneath you, then, and then you got to make the shot too.
Yeah.
I had a pretty bad year with that from, Pennsylvania. That big 5-year-old that I told you broke that buck off. He turned into my number one hit lister. And, you'll see this, on Carbon TV when we air Tinemen. You'll get the whole story on there and get to see it all, but that 5-year-old buck did come underneath the stand. And I had been at full draw 3 different times for over a minute every single time. Well, I had my, full draw back anchor point, and I was almost, I guess I never brought my nose down to the string. Well, I shoot both eyes open. And when that deer walked through that shooting lane, my pin was, 10 ring, perfect. Well, you'll see in the video, I went right over top his back, and if I would have brought my nose down to string, I would have seen I was, actually high. But, it was a bad string of events, man. That's just, sometimes how it goes.
Yeah. Sometimes you got it. Sometimes you don't. This year was one of those years where, speaking of making shots, that the deer that I took in Ohio, it's like, I was telling the guys I went out to Ohio with whenever we got back to it was public land, and we had a camper that we pulled out and stayed at a campground, and we got back to the camper and we were talking about, how everything kind of came together. And I told him I didn't even remember going to full draw. I was like, the last thing I remember was like, I realized my bow was at full draw and I had my anchors, and I stopped him in a small window, and I let the arrow fly, and he was quartering hard toward me. And I couldn't believe, for one, that deer came in, and then two, I heard him crashing. And then when I went to recover him, it was, quartering hard too. That's like the one shot, like, most people just are kind of always a little wary of taking, you know what I mean? And, I do spend a fair amount of time at the range, and man, I planted that thing right behind his front shoulder, double lung. Like, I was like, I could try that shot probably. Huh? Yeah. I was like, I could probably try that shot 100 times and not place it like that, maybe more than once. I was like,
it was meant to be.
That's right. But speaking of meant to be, so you moved to Pennsylvania, and that was obviously meant to be. What brought you to PA was meant to be.
Right.
So I'm just curious, whenever you move to a different state, and I know that you're not too awfully far from maybe where you're used to hunting and so forth, but when you move to a different state, things are a little bit different, right? So how do you start to figure out a new state or a new area, or even just, talk about how you go about gaining access? Cause you're kind of, brand new, maybe you don't know a ton of people, and how do you go about starting to kind of, lay the foundation for how you're going to hunt that particular area?
Well, the aerial maps are hands down. There's no better tool, I feel, for scouting new land. I was fortunate when I had moved here. My wife has a friend whose mother is a fellow teacher with her. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes. her son actually. So my wife's friend's son. He owns some farms. Well, he's a farmer, and so I had acquired some property this year, and going to be hunting with him some, and he seems to be really interested in food plots, and by all means, I'm no guru. There's plenty of guys who are a lot smarter than me with it, but one of the things that I'm kind of, I guess, known for locally or with the people, that know me really well is consulting. I seem to be able to pick out, the right spots or how to manicure the land to, my theory is, hunting is a game of probabilities. And if you can stack all the odds in your favor, then your, probability of harvesting an animal is, farly or way better. So one of the things that I do is I manicure the land, and I do a lot of hinge cutting to you'd be surprised at what a fallen over tree will do to make an animal walk underneath your tree stand rather than 50 yards the other way, or opening up a lane right underneath your tree stand. It's something that I like to do. And, I go in with weed killer and I make them trails, and I'm doing that this time of year when there's snow on the ground, and, obviously the ticks are terrible, right, in the summer, so I don't want to be doing it then.
Right.
But, I'm trimming lanes and, when I'm not trimming shooting lanes, I'm trimming the, walking lanes. So I'm basically coaching the deer to do what I want them to do.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing, on our farm, we've done some food plotting and stuff like that, a little bit of hinge cutting and stuff. And that's one thing that I've always kind of wanted to start to explore, is trying to create those travel corridors for them. Because it seems some of the guys I've listened to, whether it's folks like Steve Bartilla and guys of that kind of nature, it's like they're doing a lot of that type of stuff. And one of my favorite kind of sayings that they use is they're building a smarter mousetrap. And I was like, that's just that's exactly what it is. Like if you think about it, you're just building a very large mousetrap using land and the deer or the mice, and you're trying to just lead them into the places you want them to be. But so when you get on a piece of land and you start doing your manicuring and so forth, I'm assuming you start to use, some different tools, like whether it's, I'm assuming you're putting out game cameras, and of course I've seen some of the pictures, images you've taken with some of the cameras. How are you using your cameras to kind of really start to assess a property, to know what's on it, and and how are you using that to set up your hunts? But before we hear what tools Dan likes to use to set up his hunts, let's take a quick break to hear from our partners at Whitetail Institute of North America. One of the tools I've been using the past few years has been putting in different types of food plots. And today, John Cooner explains a few things to consider when planning to put in food plots.
Well, this may sound funny, but the first thing is that it's fun. Because if it's not fun, there's no point in doing it. But the second thing, really seriously, is it's not hard. It just is a matter of just recognizing a few pieces of where you're trying to end up. And once you see those pieces, you just go, gosh, this is easy, and you just knock it out. There's really not much to it. One thing, it's kind of stupid to say this, you might think, but the first thing is make sure you have deer in the area. I mean, I know it sounds stupid. If you live and play at a plant in downtown Atlanta, food plots probably aren't going to help a lot. But besides that, I would look at how big an area you think you could draw deer from. In other words, is your property landlocked? Nothing much around it, or do you have a national park you butt up on? Look outside the borders of your property and see how much land you think you could draw deer from. You want to take the adjacent land into account. Also, you want to look at what you already have available to plant. I've hunted the last 24 years on 78 acres, and have had great success. And you can do so much with small properties. Just see how much land you have available to plant. If you don't have you don't have a whole lot of land, plant what you got. It's going to help.
And that, my friends, is a Whitetail Institute Food Plot Tip of the Week. If you'd like to learn more about food plots or Whitetail Institute, visit them at whitetailinstitute.com. And now back to the show.
Well, different times of the year, obviously. I mean, I guess I would go about it differently. And, on this new piece right now, the way that I'm doing that is, you're not allowed to bait in Pennsylvania during the season, but one of the most attractive things is to throw down some feed, Mm-hmm. So it basically, for inventory, I do it after season to kind of see, what is there, and then obviously let it dry up. But, we're going to be doing a lot of food plots on that new piece. On the property that I already currently hunt in PA, I rely heavily in the oak flats and also, funnels that are, if you find a deer's A to B, and that's one of my biggest things I try to find when I'm hunting any property, and it doesn't matter if it's one I've been hunting on or whatever, because different, every other year, the woods are different, the crops are different, maybe you don't have an acorn this crop this year, so you got to, roll with the punches. And so my biggest thing is I'm trying to find their A to B, and their A being their bedding, their B being their destination, where they want to eat at. And I want to intersect them in between. And so, if you're looking at, say, an aerial map, one of the things I'll do is I'll say, well, I know because I've walked that piece of property that's thick bedding over at A, and look at the crop fields over here. So look at right in between here. If they want to go from A to B, a good place to set up is in this pinch point. So I'll set cameras there and kind of verify what my thoughts are, and then that's when I'll go ahead in and, set a stand and actually hunt it when the time is right.
Right. So do you take, I'm always interested to see how guys approach these things differently. Are you relatively aggressive when it comes to your sits, or are you really kind of looking for your most recent intelligence, or MRI that people call it, to kind of make your ambushes? I'm kind of curious how you approach that.
You want to know the truth, man? I honestly, my hunting probably consists more of driving to the different properties and checking cameras than actual sit time, stand time. Mm-hmm. And, it didn't work for me this year, the greatest, but it has in years past, so, I more am scouting than hunting. And when I do actually sit is generally, I pay a lot of attention to the barometric pressure. Moon phase, I do, but it didn't seem to really have a direct correlation with the whitetails in Ohio this year for me whatsoever. In Pennsylvania, at the property that I hunt, it was almost spot on all the way up through November. So, that's another tool I do use. And then obviously the weather, when you have a weather front moving in, usually it means high pressure. And any change in weather, those deer, it's like a light switch. It sparks them. So, generally early season, I'm not hunting unless I have a deer that is 100% patterned and I feel confident that I'm going in there to kill him. Because if I can't get him that first sit, then, chances of, I'm going in there for a reason. Well, I'm walking out of the woods after dark, right? Well, if he didn't come in, he's probably out there somewhere
on his way,
and then he's on to you.
Right.
Yeah. And once they get you, man, it gets harder. It's almost I don't want to say game over, but if the conditions aren't right and it's not probable, game of probabilities, once again, if it's not probable that I'm going to make that harvest on that evening, then I'm not going whatsoever.
Right. So do you, whenever you are going in, are you a sit all day kind of guy, or do you prefer just doing a morning hunt or an evening hunt?
Well, that changes throughout the year too, man. Early season, I'm a evening guy, and the reason why is, I'm sure you see it on your cameras and even, through hunting, I don't boot deer when I'm walking in the evening, or midday, I should say. But I do when I'm walking in the mornings. And, that's because it's probability that most deer are feeding, during the dark. So when you're walking in there during the dark, if you're booting deer, it's basically, letting them know, hey, there's pressure here. There's humans in this area. I'm going to go move over to the neighbor's woods because he's not hunting right now. And so I somewhat rely on other hunters. I noticed after the first week, I have a lot of different deer that show up on some of my properties. And, I feel confident that it's probably because they were booted off of another property and they found a false sense of security on my property. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And I follow a similar type of approach where the early season, I'm definitely on evenings. It's mornings. It's so hard to beat them. Yeah. It's so hard to beat them back to bed. You know what I mean? To get into a stand before they're headed back. This year, I even subscribed to that morning and evening sits during the rut even. And then when we made our trip to Ohio, one of the buddies I went with, he was like, and he was right. He was like, look, you're going to get your most action or the best opportunity to kill something nice. He was like in midday. He's like, I promise you, just stay in your stand.
Yep.
And, so this was one of the first times, I decided, I was like, all right, I'm just going to do all day sits. Went in, and sure enough, I had the 2 shoot opportunities I had at nice shooters, one which I got the job done, one I blew the opportunity, was, I killed my deer at 1:30, I think it was, and the other one that I saw, I think he rolled through right around 3:00, something like that. So he was dead on the money. So now I'm a sit all day guy during the rut. But you mentioned something there and I've heard you talk about this before and wanted to get you to kind of mention it here, is you have a theory on, the deer knowing the differences between weekends, weekdays, and midday movers. So could you tell me a little bit about just kind of how you think about how deer are relating to what's going on around them and being able to know what day of the week it is?
Yeah. Yeah, some people think I'm off my rocker for this one, but I'm confident in this, that deer do know the difference between weekdays and weekends. Now, here's my reasoning. Okay, when you're sitting, you put yourself out in a woods for 24 hours, I guarantee you that you're going to pick up on different noises or different, amounts of traffic going up and down the roads, maybe a bus stopping. It's undeniable that when you hear those brakes, sound off on a bus, or a backup alarm, or what I'm saying. So I really feel like those deer know when it's a weekday, they're hearing those things, and they also probably associate that with less pressure. I've noticed when I hunt during the week, I have a lot better encounters. I also can tell you right now that my cameras tell me the same thing, that there's more. I'm talking daylight movement. A deer at nighttime is great because he's on the property, but it don't mean I can kill him.
Right.
If he's got daylight tendencies, that means that deer is killable. He's screwing up, I'm going to move in there and I want him. And, I find that usually during the week is, I guess it's one of them, we'll go back to probabilities here. Probabilities of a deer walking during the week, I feel, is a lot stronger than on a weekend because they correlate the weekends with pressure.
Right.
And there's also, let's face it, there's scent in the woods, there's neighbors out, there's different things. And there are, I'm not saying this in a bad way or derogatory, but there's a lot of what people call weekend warriors,
right?
Where there's more pressure on the weekends. And then when, you're looking at midday, if you were a mature deer, 5 or 6, 7-year-old buck, all right, those are the, smartest of the smartest, the weariest of the weary. They're like a Sasquatch. You're not going to see them. Well, if your job, if your entire life depended on not being seen by a human, obviously nighttime, right, is the most probable time that an animal is going to move to eat and to live, survive. Well, if he wants to get out and cruise for a doe or check his scrapes because that testosterone's got his mind doing some crazy things, generally that'll happen midday.
Right.
And that's why, I kind of got off the course when you asked me about, what times if I prefer morning or evenings, and during, say, the last week of October through, the 3rd, 4th week in November, I'm a daybreak. I don't want to walk in the dark. I like walking in when I can be, knowledgeable about what's going on around me. You'd be surprised at how many times I'm walking into a stand and there's a buck bedded down with a doe, 10 yards off the, trail that I'd be taking, or, so on and so forth. Well, I like to be able to see what I'm doing. I can get in there quieter and I can do it with knowledge and see what's going on. So, I generally wait until it's daylight. And there's times, I'm not opposed to sleeping in during the rut sometimes, getting that extra hour of sleep, because I want to make sure that I'm there for the midday. Well, I should say, 8, 9, 10 o'clock and on through the evening. And I feel like that's, it's served me well in the past, and it did this year too, actually. I had my opportunities, man. I didn't make good on them, and I ate tag soup in Ohio, and I did take, I'm fortunate I took a nice one in PA, but that was a midday buck. I killed him midday.
Yeah, it's that's interesting because I would like to get an extra hour of sleep too. So I may have to follow up on your on your theory for no other reason.
Well, boy, when you're out there, you go on the rut tour, man, and you're, say you take a week or two off of work for most cases for guys, you do that every single day, waking up at, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to get out there. Boy, by the 3rd, 4th day, you're sitting in that stand ready to pass out and, fall out. Thank goodness you got your, harness on some of the times. But,
yeah.
That extra hour will do you wonders, man, to keep you, and keep your enthusiasm up too, man.
Yeah, you ain't kidding, man. It's not this past year, but last year, I usually take off, 10 days or so for the rut, and do a nice rut hunt sometime there in November, usually the 2nd week, or part of the 1st and, all the 2nd, at least here in PA. And if I'm going to Ohio, I switch it up a little bit. But, last year I did that and I didn't kill. I mean, I didn't get an opportunity to even draw my bow back on a shooter buck. I had a doe tag. And so the last day at I don't even know, it was 9 o'clock in the morning, I took a doe, but I hunted every day from, up at 4:30 till dark every day for those 10 days or whatever it was. And man, and that was a grind for sure. And then this year I just kind of lucked out. It was the 3rd day and I was done in Ohio, and the rest of the guys I was with still had tags. So I ended up hanging out in the camper for a couple of days while they were up early hunting and had my coffee, and it was
nothing wrong with that.
That's right, man. It was a nice life. I was living pretty high on the hog, but I could get used to it, I guess is what I'm saying. But it's funny that you mentioned the sounds in the woods, because you're 100% right, man. When we were down at, I'm hunting down at our farm, and I go down and I hunt a weekend, it's, all the neighbors, there's chainsaws going, there's people driving ATVs, the neighbors have their, the guns out, doing a bunch of target practice and stuff like that. And it's just, just all kinds of noises. And for sure, whenever I hunt during the week, always see better movement, and it's funny. You even mentioned the school buses or buses screeching, because my father-in-law, if he hunts behind his house, it's not close. I mean, he lives out in the country, but the school bus goes by and he would call me. He'd say, "Yeah, I saw this bucket, 3:15, because I could hear the school bus stop, just up the road or whatever. I know that it comes by the house." Yeah. So if he's picking up on that, just spending a couple of days out there, the deer have picked up on that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yep. I don't know that a bus or anything like that would, hurt deer movement. They're not, hurt by the sound of it, but I think they associate that with danger or more pressure, and that's at least what I've found.
Right. So, the one thing I know that you're, to kind of shift gears here, the one thing I know that you're really, really known for, and it's probably how I kind of heard of you first, which was for tuned in archery and your ability to tune a bow. It's like I heard your name related to that before we ever met, or any of that stuff, and before I knew that you were involved in Tinemen and so forth. So I have some questions around bow tuning for no other reason that I think folks out there would want to learn a little bit about it, but I'm just really curious about it because it's something that is really foreign to me. That I've always wanted to work on my own bow, but I'm really, really scared to work on my own bow, to be quite honest. But so if you could just give me a sense of what tuned in archery is and how you got into what got you into bow tuning.
Well, I used to be a Matthews guy, and I'd go and I'd buy the, best bow they had. And I did this, I think, 3 years in a row. And spent, I think, $900 on my first bow. Then the next year after that, I went and spent, $1,000 or, whatever. Anyways, long story short, I didn't know why, I'm buying the best bow out there. Why is it not shooting good? And I couldn't accept that, something's wrong with this bow. Well, I come to find out after, I did some studying, and I started watching, some different, YouTube videos or, Google searches and stuff of that sort. And come to find out that, if a bow its rest is out of whack, then you're not going to be shooting good. Well, I come to find out that bow was completely, every one of those bows, and it was the bow tech, the guy who had sold me the bow. There's a big difference between a bow salesman and a bow technician.
Right.
I'm a bow technician who sells bows. I'm not a bow salesman who puts together bows. I got my start from learning bows in and out, because I became interested in it, no different than the hunting stuff or anything. I guess become somewhat infatuated with stuff. So I wanted to know, how can I make this thing as good as it can be? And when I started, doing that and seeing progress with the, quality of my shooting, I said, well, heck, man, this is kind of easy, man. I really enjoy this, So then I started working on buddies' bows, and then, their word gets around, at work or whatever it might be. Hey, Dan tuned my bow, man, and I'm telling you, this thing shoots great now. Well, it kind of snowballed. So I said, well, we better make this a actual legit business, because I'm starting to get people I have no idea who they are.
Right.
And, it turned into where, I get bows sent to me from all across the U.S. now. I mean, I ship down to Texas, Florida. You'd be surprised at how many guys from down south send me their bows. And I take that as the biggest compliment, man. When somebody, has that much faith in me, to send me a bow from, across a few states or across the entire United States, that's, it's very, I guess, rewarding when that does happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's, just like I said, that was kind of how I first heard of you, was your ability to tune a bow. And that was kind of led me to kind of do a little bit more, investigating. And, I'm always interested with guys who, are, I guess skilled with a bow in many ways, whether it's tuning or whether it's shooting or whatever the case might be, just to kind of get a sense is like, how do they pick out a bow, or what are the things that they're looking for when they're choosing a bow? So, if you're looking for, if Dan is going to buy a new bow, what are some things that you would look for and that maybe other folks should kind of like pay attention to as they're shopping around?
I'm a back wall and balance guy. There's, you can pick up every bow on the market, say any manufacturer's top bow they got, and you will notice differences, whether it be the vibration, whether it be the draw cycle being very a hard break on it. Some have spongy back walls, some have very strong, very good back walls, some are more quiet, some are flamethrowers, speed bows, and some are for myself, hunting, I want a nice smooth draw. I shoot a lot, so I don't want to be, ripping my arm off to get the bow back. And when those hard break cams usually stop on them draw stops, it usually creates a lot of noise. So when, say it's a crisp morning, you're out there in the stand and it's the same bow that you were shooting at targets and you never noticed it. Well, when it's really quiet out there and you got a big deer underneath you that's pretty keen to his surroundings, you draw that bow back, boy, and he hears that draw stop, you're done.
Yeah.
So I guess if I'm looking at what kind of bow I personally like, I would tell you a solid back wall and a balanced bow.
Is there a particular brand that you've found that is just kind of is giving you those things?
Yeah, man. Prime. I shoot Prime, and their dual cam technology alone. All right, we're not going to talk about the new Synergy, and everybody knows, the centering technology and the balance in those. But before they even had the Synergy out, they had what's called the dual cams. Okay, so you put a bow at full draw, and it's got 2 points of not anchor, but stabilizing. So those bows, I feel, are when you're holding at 100 yards, okay, and you have both eyes open and you're trying to, what I call is a hone. When I don't come down on a target, I don't come up on a target, and I don't go across the target. I try and hone. So if I had a laser pointer on my stabilizer, that laser would be on that target going in small circles, and the tighter your hone is, the more accurate you are. But anyways, what I find is that those primes, I mean, I can hold groups out at long distances, man, that I can't do as good with different other bows. Now I can shoot, a lot of different bows. And honestly, some of them are maybe better with draw cycle, or some of them might be a little faster. Some of them might be quieter, or, more dead in the hand, but if I'm looking at, what I personally like is the back wall balance, accuracy, overall fit and finish. And, them primes really do the ticket for me.
Nice. And so have you ever shot, I'm just curious, because when you like the prime, what they're kind of giving you, and I've shot the primes before. Last year I went and I shot a pile of bows, and then this year at the outdoor show I actually shot one of the Gearhead bows, and their draw cycle and back wall reminded me a lot of a prime. Have you ever shot one of those?
Oh God, yeah, man. I honestly, I love them little bows. I want one in the worst way for when I'm blind hunting.
Yeah.
Telling me that wouldn't be nice in a blind, man. I mean, when you're drawing that bow, 33 axle to axle or 32, whatever it is you shoot, you're worried about that top cam on the top, or, the bottom. I have bow holder. I mean, I've hit it off of that. But them little bows, man, are slick.
Oh man,
and they're accurate.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got to pull a couple. I pulled back the 18-inch at the show, and then I shot the 20-inch. And it's where I saw a great use, just because they're so light. I'm getting ready to do an elk trip in September for a DIY backpack trip for 2 weeks in Montana. And I was like,
nice.
I was like, man, how nice would it be to have one of those little bows that's that light that I could take, since I'm going to be doing so much hiking, literally will fit in your pack. You know what I mean? I was like,
strap it on your backpack,
yeah,
man.
Exactly. But that, you know, I did find out that I think you can't use anything shorter than a 20-inch in Montana, I think was the rule or something like that, which was fine. Cause I mean, that still would fit.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's what the one guy told me. Cause I was talking to I don't know, I think he was part of their marketing department or something like that. And we were just kind of talking about, cause what I said was, I was like, man, this has a great use for anyone who Western hunts that has to do a lot of spot and stalk or hiking or whatever. I was like, just cause the miles you're going to put on, you know, it's like, it's light. The other cool thing was that it flips back and forth, so you can either shoot it right or left-handed. Like, it doesn't have a molded hand grip. It's like that's bolted in. It's just, it was wild, man. But so you were mentioning shooting. Yeah,
they're smooth little bows.
Yeah, they are for sure. You were mentioning shooting out to a range, a distance. So I was curious, how would you, if someone were coming to you saying, you know, Dan, I want to extend my range because I'm getting ready to say they're getting ready to do a Western hunt, right? And they've hunted whitetail all their life and they're used to shooting 30, maybe 40 yards max. What would be some tips you would give them to help them extend their range to be able to shoot accurately out to that 50, 60, and maybe even that 70-yard mark?
Number one is obviously tune the bow. If you talk with any Western hunter or anybody who does, you know, long range shooting, you know, they'll tell you if your bow's not tuned, you're not going to have consistency. So, you know, first of all, obviously tune the bow, consistency and reps. You know, you got to put the time in and build. You know, you'd be surprised. It's not really your back shoulder; it's your front shoulder holding that bow up. You know, and tighten your hone and you know those little stabilizer muscles. Man, I can tell. You know, right now, I honestly I'm not shooting my bow at all. I'm shooting customers' bows. You know, to tune them. So I would, if I were to go step out and try and take a long range shot, man, I'd probably be, you know, I'd be all over the target kind of thing. And when I'm doing, I guess when I'm shooting those long range shots effectively is when I'm, you know, I mean, I'm spending the evenings out there and, you know, really practicing it.
Right. Yeah. I hear that. So so speaking of, you know, practicing, when you are in it, in the thick of it, what's your practice regimen look like?
Well, obviously, like, you know, I work on a lot of bows, so I get, I guess, my reps from that. And I do, you know, I probably shoot maybe 3, 4, sometimes I shoot 5 or 6 times a week in the evenings. You know, when it starts to get a little bit nicer outside and, you know, it's not blazing hot, it's not freezing cold, you know, and it's bearable and enjoyable. Yeah. You know, I guess it kind of just depends on what day of the week you catch me, man. You know, I don't have a set regimen. I'm not like, you know, military, you know, I got to shoot this day, that day, whatever, you know. And, but I do, it's in my mind that, you know, I need to make sure that I'm, you know, on my A game. And, you know, here's the deal, Clint, is, you know, I shoot more than a lot of people I know. I don't really know too many that shoot more often than I do, but all those shots this year did not mean crap when that buck walked underneath of me and I shot over top his back. And, you know, dude, I went through, you know, moments of tears with it. Oh, yeah. I had prepared myself for that moment all year long. I prepared myself mentally, physically. I prepared myself with the shot. You know, dude, it all fell apart. I got rattled at the last second. I didn't know he was going to walk across that shooting lane. It was take that shot right there then. And you know, I mean, just all the practice in the world, though, you know, is going to build your confidence, and confidence is, you know, a very important role, you know, out in the deer stand or at the range. So, you know, obviously build your confidence up and I guess prepare for anything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, no truer words I don't think have ever been said about archery hunting than you just said right there, which is the confidence aspect of it. And you get it in a bunch of different ways, whether it's your preseason scouting to know that you're confident in the stand, that you're putting yourself in a good spot. And then ultimately it comes down to your confidence with your with your weapon of choice. And then even still, there's always things that are out of your control that just happen that just don't go your way, some days. But I think one thing that would definitely, kind of increase, folks' confidence being in a tree stand with a bow is having a tuned bow, and so for me, it's when people talk about tuning bows, it's like, I understand that it means to make it more accurate and shoot better and just, very like basic, elementary things. But, what exactly is being adjusted whenever you're tuning a bow?
Well, see, what a lot of people do is they'll either eye it or they'll use different things. And honestly, I use lasers and levels to start. There's no human error with a laser, and there's no human error with a level. You know what I mean? They are as good as it gets.
Right.
So I start with that. One thing that I do really, I've had amazing luck with is Airshaft tuning. And that's what I'll do is I'll pull the vanes off of the arrow. Now, to do that, it's a large, it's a big concept, man. Every single bow has a different cam design, right? So some of them break harder than others. Some of them are smoother. So different arrows with different spines will react differently off of a rest, right? So once that we're lined up with our rest, what I'll do is I will pull those vanes off and I'll Airshaft tune the bow. So what that is, Airshaft tuning entails is basically I have a set way that I pick an arrow shaft for a specific bow or different ones that I'll pick for, so-and-so's bow. Then I'll figure out the correct length that I need to be at. And generally, I got that whole concept from longbows and recurves. When I started shooting longbows and recurves, I wasn't sure what arrows do I want to buy for this or what tips,
Right.
I know some guys shoot 185 grain tips. Some guys shoot 125, why? So that's how they tune recurves and longbows is, the Airshaft tuning. So I said to myself, I'm like, man, like every one of these bows are, and my reason that I had received from an older gentleman who, big trad guy, he had said, well, every one of these bows are different. Every single one of these bows are different, and you need to find a shaft that works for your bow, your specific, bear bow. And so I said to myself, well, like every compound bow is different too. So why wouldn't that concept work with that? Does it hold true? So, obviously me, I'm not the type to just think about something for too long without trying it, and it's got me in trouble, man. But, that's how I got into the Airshaft tuning. And I found, in research that there are other people that do this as well. I paper tune sometimes, but, I've done so much of the Airshaft tuning. It just seems like that is a more spot on way for me. And, it's quicker for me to Airshaft tune than paper tune. And I don't have to mess around with paper either.
So you talked a little bit there for a second. You'd mentioned that every bow is different, right? And so you have to pick the right arrow for that particular bow because each one has a different characteristic. So in the same kind of, vein, I guess, every person is a little bit different when shooting. And if you had to pick, I guess, one thing that is the difference between an accurate shooter and someone who is not quite as accurate, what is one of those things that you see people that just constantly make someone inaccurate that is like one of the biggest watch outs for, shooting a bow accurately?
100% consistency. I feel very strongly about this, Clinton. Don't take this the wrong way, man, but I don't feel like that's an opinion. I feel like it's a fact that the most accurate shooters are the most consistent shooters. The people who are inaccurate are inconsistent. And when you can consistently think of yourself like if you can mimic a machine as close as you can, okay, every single time that you draw your bow, if you can do the same exact anchor points on the backside and hold that bow true every single time, on your mark, on your target, you're going to have the same results every single time. That's how guys smack arrows or Robin Hood arrows, is they're just that consistent, and they have, really honed their skills, and they can hone that pin down on their target. Consistency, man, definitely.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I consider myself a novice archer. I'm a hunter. I spend a fair amount of time at the range. I would never claim to be the best shot at it ever, by any stretch of the imagination. I typically am pretty consistent, but this was one year this year, man, where it's like, I'm not going to lie. It's like, I was just talking to a buddy of mine where, I went back to the range here after late season ended and started messing with my anchor points because I just could not get comfortable with my bow all year. Didn't matter what I did. Mm-hmm. I didn't like my anchor points. They didn't feel comfortable, but I was hesitant to switch them up in the middle of the season because, out the 30 and 40 yards, I was, what you would call good enough to get the job done, make an ethical kill, but it wasn't, sounds like you and I are a lot alike, where it's like, I'm really particular about things. When I go to the range and I'm shooting at a target, it's, I want to be able to put my groups, no matter what distance I'm shooting, inside, if it's, within 30 yards, I want to be inside of a Pepsi can top. It's like with all my arrows. Right. If I'm out to 40 and 50 yards, it's like then I'm talking more of like a coffee mug. You know what I mean? It's like I'm willing to like loosen it up a little as I get a little further out. But it's so I'm pretty particular about it. And so I went back right after late season and started dialing it back in, because I was grabbing my anchor point and I was dropping the tip of my nose on the top of my string, and I just felt like I had to like move my neck. I felt like I just had too much head movement to try to get locked in. And so at the end of the season, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start pulling my kisser all the way into the corner of my mouth and let that be my anchor point, and just lay my nose on the side of the string and let it be where it's at. And if I have to adjust my sight left or right to compensate for it, then at least I'll have my anchor point exactly the same every time. Right. Man, I went to the range. I flung a couple down 30 right next to one another, 40 right next to one another, out to 50, hit bullseye, put 3 right on top of each other. I was like, you got to be kidding me. That was all it took, was just changing that one anchor point. You know what I mean? It just changed up everything. And I was
comfortable.
Yeah, I was comfortable. Now, what I have to get a little bit used to is I shoot a Matthews Halon, which is a pretty aggressive bow. So it's like I had to get used to just, I was a little bit further back, I guess, in my draw. And so it's like I was having to get used to not letting the bow creep on me, essentially. Because I was just,
I got you.
Yeah. So that was the one thing I'm kind of working out now, is just kind of trying to lock in and making sure I'm keeping my back tight, and before I release the arrow. And I use an aggressive bow.
Well, let me ask.
Sure.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question now. So how do you determine your draw length? Is it just something that somebody had told you at one time as your draw length, and you stuck with that, or do you have a method that you like to use to find a draw length?
So at first, I looked up online just kind of how I would figure out what my draw length was, and figured it out. And then when I bought my bow initially, I went in and they measured me. I'm 26.5 inches.
Okay.
And then I actually took it to a buddy of mine who he's from my hometown. He used to shoot competitively, and he has a pro shop there in our hometown. And I took it to him just because I wanted to be sure that I was, where I needed to be. And he measured me and he confirmed where I needed to be. So I did do a couple checks because I was a little wary. I mean, is that something that you see people kind of fudging a little bit?
Yeah, bad, man. And that's, the reason I asked is, if you can't hit your anchor points consistently, that's generally it's because of the draw length being too long. And if, that's the best starting point to get someone shooting better, is to get their draw length corrected, man. But if you're already, with that, then you're kosher, man. You're good to go.
Yeah, I think it's just a little bit more time at the range to get used to the new anchor point. But I was tickled, man, when I came home that day from the range. I came home, I told my wife, I was like, I shot like I've never shot before. I was like, I didn't even want to go to sleep. I just wanted to go back to the range and shoot all night. But so I know we've been talking for a little while, and I definitely want to get to this last section here that I want to kind of touch on, and that is your involvement, with Tinemen. Because I'm always curious how folks get started, filming hunts and in that realm? Because I'll be honest with you, man, it's like I started filming my hunts 2 years ago, and it is one of the toughest things that I've ever added to my hunting regimen ever in my entire life. I mean, I enjoy doing it, but man, it is, there's some days when I'm lugging the gear into the tree and it's, you know, I didn't get any action. I didn't get any footage. Yeah. I'm like, why'd I carry all this extra stuff for, you know? So how did you get started with the filming aspect in Tinemen overall?
Well, it was, I started it, you know, just kind of more wanting another challenge kind of deal. By all means, you know, I've never shot no 200-inch deer. I've never shot what I'd consider, you know, an absolute monster, but I was doing pretty well there, where I was, you know, shooting some better Pope and Young bucks, you know, every year. And I said, well, you know what, man, let's, you know, that's what life is about in my eyes, is getting better and challenging yourself. And hunting is no different to me. So, you know, I guess the year I started filming, I had bought a pretty nice camera, and said, well, you know what, let's go out there and give this a try. And I actually had, he's probably like a mid 140s, really nice buck, come right underneath my stand. And, well, you know, let's rewind. I'm sorry. I had missed a big 8-point, on film.
Oh man.
And it was, you know, it was not a far off shot either, man. It just was, I was messing with the camera and I got all, you know, flustered. I was like shaking and sweating, you know, and I missed that deer. Then it was like, you know, probably 4 nights later, man, I had that, you know, 145-ish buck come underneath of me. I'm talking 5 yards. And, if you go on my Facebook page, you'll see that deer. It's the one with the real green food plot in the background, you know, that he's on right underneath of me. That deer is 5 yards underneath of me. I never got my bow up because I had both hands on the camera thinking, you know, oh, I'm going to get this deer on film, beautiful film. And I'm going to, you know, put an arrow in him. It's going to be an awesome hunting show. That's not how it went at all, boy. He just did it. You know, he got that close and didn't like it. But, so yeah, I got started, you know, kind of just messing around with it, tinkering around with it. Then, you know, I guess I wanted to promote my bow shop somewhat. And I figured, well, heck, man, you know, there's no better way to promote it, indirectly. You know, I'm not one of them type of people when I watch a hunting show or, you know, I can't stand with some, oh, you have to shoot this bow and hunt out of this tree stand or you're not going to be able to kill deer. Well, right. Come on now, give me a break.
Right. Plenty of guys have been killing out of wooden stands and trees for years.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So, you know, I was like, well, you know what, man, we'll just do some hunting shows and you know, we'll, you know, promote the bow shop that way. So that was, you know, Tuned In Archery is what we were just team Tuned In. And that was, God, I think 5 or 6 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it seems like every year we have, you know, progressed. We did Pursuit Channel, what is that, 3 or 4 years ago now. And we're, you know, do some work with Hunt Channel. Last year we did. And, you know, this year we signed an exclusive with Carbon TV. It seems like, you know, social media and, you know, the digital network is where our main, you know, fan base is and where, you know, our most viewers are. So we're going to keep it there. You know, we don't really have any want or need to go to any major network either. Right. So, it works out real nice, you know, for the marketing aspect of the bow shop. And then I also own Hang On Helper. It's a product that I had invented and, you know, manufacture. So, you know, it's basically what Tinemen is it's a marketing platform, man. And all of us, you know, own a company and we just want to, you know, brand awareness, allow people to know what it is we're doing. And it's pretty amazing how many people are actually interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I've watched, you know, plenty of the videos, and I really like what you're doing, just from the perspective that it's honest hunting. You know, and you can tell that from the footage and the approach and just the emotion that you see in your, you know, in one of the videos particularly I'm talking about, in your face whenever you took a pretty nice toad. You know, and all that stuff is just, it's genuine, you know, and I think that's the part that that people are really kind of gravitating toward. And you're right. there's a lot of folks who are kind of gravitating more toward that, the digital media space for video, because that's where people want to consume it. So why not give it to them where they want to be? And I got to be honest, man, selfishly, I'm excited that you're going to be on Carbon TV, because every Sunday morning for me, after I get up in the morning and make breakfast for my daughter, and then I usually throw some Carbon TV on the iPad while I sit and have my coffee. And that's usually my Sunday morning ritual, is to watch some hunting shows.
Right on.
And it drives my wife crazy, because the whisper talking drives her nuts.
Oh yeah, man. Oh goodness. Yeah, I hear about that all the time, man. I honestly, Clint, why I think people seem to like our show, with Mike Tinemen is people can relate to it. We're real world people hunting real world. That buck I killed that giant on, guess how many acres that was? 4 acres.
Wow.
That I had access to. And believe me, I was out there, there was times, I'd see the neighbor over on his property hunting, and some of these deer are getting killed on state game lands, but the thing that people really like about it is it's all DIY. We don't go hunt outfitters. Every one of these deer we patterned, we did the work, we planted the food plots. We're the ones who, I don't want to take, full credit, because that's why I believe, I had some of the bad fortune I did this year, is because I wasn't giving credit to the, man upstairs who should have the credit.
Right.
But he enables us to do these things, and we, take advantage of that. And, we do the work that's needed to get them deer on the ground, man. And that's what people can relate to. I think, people are kind of, the large majority of viewers that are watching hunting shows on, Thursday nights, Friday night, or whatever it might be. I don't even own TV anymore. But,
right.
Those viewers, the large majority of them, man, they're not hunting 600 acre, farms in Iowa. They're hunting, state game lands in, Ohio, or they're hunting, Missouri, small properties, behind their house or something, kind of thing. And we're no different. We're doing those same things, man.
Right. Yeah, I hear you, man. It's, I'm lucky to an extent where, the farm we have back home, it's, roughly 240 acres. So that's, a nice chunk of ground that we can manicure and do some stuff with, which is great. I'm fortunate to have that type of opportunity. And I spend a lot of my time on public ground anymore. I like the challenge of kind of going out and seeing what's around the next corner. And, I appreciate the adventure. The buck I got in Ohio this year was on public ground. I did a hunt with, my friend Phil, who's usually the co-host on the podcast here, that couldn't make it today. But he's got a couple acres behind his parents' house that we hunted this year, and I had a great encounter with an 8-point back there. And I want to say it might be 5 acres. If it's 10, it's pushing 10. And we had a great encounter and saw some deer, and it was, he's got a good little spot back there with some bedding, some cover, and a little spot that I think we're going to put a food plot in this year. But you're right, man. That's the way a lot of people are hunting nowadays. And it's just, and when they see people out there doing that and giving, I think, proper respect to that type of hunting, I think it goes a long way with people, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think, your show does a good job of doing that, and, appreciate you taking that approach.
I appreciate hearing that.
Yeah. But hey, man, I know I've kept you on here for a little bit more than an hour now, and I want to be sensitive to your time. So before I let you go, the last thing I want to ask is just, I want you to take us on a hunt with you and give me your most memorable hunt. It doesn't have to be a harvest. It could be a miss or just like an experience and, that you had in the timber, but give us every detail. Tell me what state you're hunting in, and give me the story all the way back to the tailgate of the truck.
Well, Clint, I'll take you to a hunt in Ohio this year with my wife Stacy. We just got married this year. We had met through hunting, and she's been the best thing that's ever happened to me in many different ways. But I pretty much gave her all early season. If there was a deer that we could get on, then it was hers, because I know her time was limited. So I actually had her hunting a buck that I don't know if he was 185 or 195, but he was a stud. And he actually, he was daylight walking. We tried getting her on him. And she has an itchy trigger finger. She ended up shooting a doe in Ohio the evening that we went in there for him. And had she not, I really question, if he would have, came in and presented her with the shot, because he was the next morning and the next evening.
Right.
He was on camera during daylight. Anyways, we never ended up getting on that buck, but we had went to what I would consider my old faithful. It's a swamp, and it's been known for some really good deer coming through there. There happened to be a really nice 10-point that was showing up on the Exodus, and I said, well, you know what, hon, let's go in there. Let's see if we can't get on him. He's not been daylight walking at all, but he had daylight tendencies last year. He put on probably, 10 to 15 inches. He didn't do a whole lot from last year, as far as size wise, but, he was a good deer. So I told her, that's a deer we're going in after. So sure enough, man, we went in there and we didn't get on him the first day or the first evening. So we went back out the next morning. This was late October, I believe she took that buck, but it was, getting close to when the rut was coming around. And we had a weather front that was moving in, and I told her, we have to hunt before the weather front, during the weather front, and after. Well, we were sitting out there in the morning, and boy, that rain came, and it was nasty, windy. Well, so we jumped out of the tree, and, we went, I think, got a bite to eat, and took a nap in Walmart's parking lot, man. And I told her, it looks like the rain's starting to, let off a little bit. The wind's dying down. We need to get our butts out there. The second that this rain and the weather stops, I guarantee you, it's going to heat up and things are going to light up. So, we got out and got in a tree stand, and not 15 minutes after that, she's turned around freaking out. Dan, big buck, just stood up. And, he's coming out of the bedding area, and this will be airing on time. And, but boy, you want to talk about excitement, man. He put on a show for us. I got him coming across that field the whole way. And he came back behind us directly downwind. When she shot that deer, he had just crossed our wind. And, if she wouldn't have shot when she did, I don't honestly know one way or another whether we would have got him, but she had hit him a little bit high. So we were like, oh no, I hope he's down, because we didn't hear or see him go down. So, we get across he ran up over a set of train tracks and went on to the next property over. So we got down in there, and we ended up, she walked past him, and I had seen him, and when she turned around and saw him laying there, man, that emotion that she, gave, and how appreciative she was, and that right there, honestly, is hands down my best hunting memory I've ever had. And I don't know that it's going to take a lot to top that.
Wow, man. I'm sitting here, literally just got cold chills. You know what I mean? Just listening to, cause it's that, when you mentioned the emotion, man, it's I don't know. There's something about it. I can't put my finger on it. And to be honest with you, I don't care that I ever do. I just hope I always feel like this about
we need to learn to bottle it.
I know, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's for sure.
That's what keeps us going.
That's right. But hey, man, I just want to say thanks for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure having you on. And,
I appreciate you having
me. Absolutely, man. And I hope we get to catch up again soon.
Definitely, brother. Good talking to you. Have a good one.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. Just like to thank Dan for coming on. You can, of course, find more information about Tuned In Archery, Tinemen, and all the things that Dan has going on at his website at tunedinarchery.com. Also, be sure to give him a follow on his social media platforms. I'll be sure to put all the links to his social media platforms and his website in the blog post show notes. Also, want to say thank you to all of you for tuning in. If you like what you're hearing, feel free to subscribe to the podcast via iTunes, Stitcher, and you can also listen to us on Google Play. And if you would be so kind, please leave us a 5-star iTunes rating. We'd be very appreciative of that. We also need to be sure to thank our partners at Exodus Outdoor Gear, Whitetail Institute of North America, and Lone Wolf Portable Tree Stands. And now, I know that I've waited this long, I will go ahead and give out the directions for how you can win a free Exodus trail camera. So it's really simple. You really only need to do 3 things in order to be in the running for the Exodus trail camera. And that is, you need to, if you haven't already, you need to go to the Truth from the Stand Facebook page and like the page. The second thing you need to do is like the blog or like the Facebook post for this specific podcast. And the last thing you need to do is share the Facebook post for this specific podcast. You do those 3 things, and you will be in the running for winning an Exodus Lift trail camera. And we, of course, will announce the winner in podcast number 20. So good luck to everybody out there. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see y'all.